This is the Blood Red Podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
The Blood Red Podcast, courtesy of the Liverpool Echo. I'm Clarke. Thanks for joining us. The late thing against the Bees. The Reds go on, heading to Porto, looking to make it 2-2 in the Champions League. Coming up, we'll talk about the weekend that was in the Premier League. Who got for Porto to do all of that? We have our Liverpool from Paul Gorst, the face that runs the place, Rimmer and Theo Squires. I hope you are all well. And of course, we'll go to, look straight back over the course of the weekend, and the draw with Brent didn't quite go to plan for us, despite taking the lead twice.
No, it didn't. Liverpool 16 games unbeaten now in the Premier League, dating back to March for when they got beat by Fulham. And I think across all of those 16 games, I think this was probably the one where they performed the least. Certainly collectively, Fabinho had probably his worst game in a Liverpool shirt. Van Dijk and Matip look like players who have barely played in 2021. And that's understandable, forgivable, you can accept that. Andy Robertson was poor. Just pretty much to a man that there wasn't too many who showed up. Sadio Mane had a bit of an off day. And yet Liverpool still managed to score 4 and could have had 5 or 6. But by the same token, Brentford could have certainly have had 4, couldn't he? Kind of figured out Liverpool quite well in terms of the overloads at the back post. Trent Alexander-Arnold was left isolated for the second and the third goals, and the opening goal as well, you know, with Ethan Pinnock kind of peeling off around the back post. It seemed to be a very deliberate tactic from Brentford all game, and it worked for them, didn't it? So fair play to them. I think if they play like that most weeks, they're going to have no danger of staying in this division, and you just hope that they can replicate that kind of performance when they play a Chelsea or a City or maybe even a Manchester United. But no getting away from a bit of an off day for Liverpool, and a strange one in terms of Liverpool going top before they'd even played because of Chelsea's defeat at Man City. Liverpool extended the lead at the top, and you're still coming away from it feeling, you know, what if and should have and could have. So strange one for Jurgen Klopp, but he seemed to take it in stride. He didn't have too many complaints over too many decisions, and just one that you have to take on the chin. And ultimately, Liverpool are still top, and have got a chance to turn the screw on Sunday, haven't they?
Is that the case, Joe, that I suppose when you kind of look back on a couple of seasons ago and that start Liverpool had to the campaign, pretty much winning all the games by the draw at Old Trafford, that was a freak and isn't quite reality? And I suppose a couple of years ago, that would have been the game that would have probably been seen out 2-1 or 3-2, either of those. But we kind of forget sometimes there's another team on the pitch, and give Brentford their dues. They played really well. They caused Liverpool a number of problems.
Yeah, you know, I think it's exactly it. And I thought there was a bit of an overreaction on, you know, in all parts, you know, on social media, you know, even amongst ourselves to an extent, because I think, like you've just said, Liverpool have raised standards to such an extent in the year that they won the league and the year that they came so close that drawing a game now suddenly feels like a defeat. And I don't think that's the case. I think this year, you know, I've seen a few people saying that they think it'll be a 90-odd point season for the Premier League winners. And I'm not so sure I agree, because I think you find that, you know, Chelsea, when Liverpool and Man City competed and Liverpool won the league one year, City won it the previous year, you know, they were the two outstanding teams, weren't they? Whereas I now think Chelsea have clearly got themselves a lot stronger, have come a lot closer. Man United have obviously improved. So I don't think it's a case of one team's going to rack up 90 points and, you know, or Man City and Liverpool are going to push each other all the way. I just don't see it being like that. I think that this year you'll see teams take points off each other. You'll see a lot of the other teams sort of competing, and points will be dropped. I mean, if you look at it, Liverpool drawing with Brentford, there's the manner in which it happened, you know, losing that late goal to make it 3-3 sort of makes it worse. But look at Man City's draw with Southampton. That's a lot worse result. You know, the way I look at it, you know, you're at home, a team like Man City dropping 2 points at home to Southampton, you'd be really frustrated. This one is ultimately, it's the sort of thing that I think happens sometimes. A team like Brentford, who've come up, got a bit of the wind beneath their sails, and, you know, there's a good atmosphere at their stadium. They're clearly up for it at this stage of the season and fancy it. there's always a bit of a danger. It reminds me that, the Watford games, the opening day of the 2017-2018 season, and when Liverpool drew 3-3 there, and you saw some good attacking points, but they lost control at times. And whilst we haven't seen Liverpool play like that a lot since the likes of Van Dijk have come in, it can still happen because teams can still have those sorts of days. And look, I thought Klopp was right in after the game. He said, we could have won that 4-2. Liverpool could have scored a couple of goals there at the end. We saw a save from the goalkeeper, which was, outrageous at 1-1, wasn't it, when he saved from Jota? So on another day, Liverpool could have gone into the half-time 2-1 up, could have been 4-2 up before Brentford even thought about trying to score an equaliser. So I don't think we should get too carried away, but I do think it was a warning for Liverpool, and the slight concern for me is that other teams of Brentford's ilk will look at that now and go, well, do we loop in some crosses and try and put them at that back post, overload Trent, cause Liverpool problems that way? So that to me is the main concern. But I think the result, look, it's a point, but you're disappointed because of the manner that they conceded the late equaliser. But it's not the end of the world. And I think Liverpool, they go and beat City next week and all's rosy again, isn't it? So, I think there'll be a lot of twists and turns. I think it's far too early to worry about 2 points dropped.
Yeah, was it the first time there, maybe since obviously Van Dijk returned, but even since he's come to the club, we've kind of seen that defensive vulnerability? Kind of saw a few people sort of saying that it was a throwback to the old rock and roll football days, kind of the Dortmund games, the Norwich City 5-4 as well, that it was really sort of helter-skelter stuff, and Liverpool just in the end couldn't get control of it. And normally that's been such a strength of theirs under Jurgen Klopp, and especially since Van Dijk's coming, of going to the Lions Den and just taking all the sting out of the game, but they seem to kind of get caught up in it on Saturday.
Well, you got to remember, Van Dijk was at centre-back when they conceded 7 at Villa. It's not a necessarily new thing, but then these defenders, they've just come back from long-term injuries, haven't they? And yeah, you get adrenaline to carry you through those first few weeks, but then the longer the season gets on, it's going to take its toll more and more, and that'll be why Jurgen Klopp has rotated the centre-backs and given Van Dijk and Matip a rest every so often. You've also got Robertson coming back from injury as well. Like, granted, it's not anything as serious as the centre-backs, but an ankle injury can still be a nuisance to come back from. So it's one where you are going to get these, not freak results, but games where they are had at, to be, I suppose, where Liverpool aren't fully at the races, and it's just rust. It's what they've got to try and get used to and get rid of it. Like, as the others have said, it's the fact they were so good when they won the league. That was the freak. That no teams do it. They don't go and win every single game, every single season. This is just the standards that have been raised to. It's not Football Manager. You can't save the game before it, and if the result doesn't go the way you want it to, restart, load again, and then have another go. You're just going to have to accept some draws along the way. And with Brentford and City games, it's one where if you go into the international break and you said you'd have 4 points from them, everyone will bite their hands off. Yeah, the point has come against Brentford. Liverpool now just need to make sure they get the win against City. And everything's rosy, but as Joe said, but then they could be second tonight, couldn't they? Brighton could go top of the league. It's one of those, Brighton aren't winning the Premier League this season. Telling you that now, it's not going to be like Leicester City, is it, when you got the teams behind them? It's far too early for anything to be decided. It's just getting the rust out of the system for the centre-backs, accepting there are going to be some results like this, and just making the best of it. Liverpool have been at the races against Brentford, but then we've seen United struggle in the last couple of weeks. Chelsea looks so good, and then they lost to City. City have dropped points to Spurs, Southampton, and that was a Southampton team that have shipped 9 twice in the past couple of seasons. There are going to be these sorts of results, and Liverpool are in as good a place as they can be heading forward into what we know is going to be a huge game next weekend.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Right, because we've got Porto to talk about, let's pick out a few key themes from the game and just get into them before we move on. I think the biggest, Gorsty, maybe the talking point after the game, and Jurgen Klopp was asked about it in his post-match press conference, was the decision to bring off Curtis Jones. It seemed to have been made before he scored the goal, and then he got to do his celebration, and as he finished, what, me? I'm coming off? What did you make of it?
Looking back now, you could say it's a bit of a strange one, wasn't it? Obviously, it was decided at 2-2. So Klopp's thinking, let's go 4-2-3-1 with all the 4 attackers on and try and win the game. I don't know what the kind of protocols are behind making a sub in the Premier League, but was it too late to just have a little word with the lino and tell him that you're keeping it as it is and you're staying on, or maybe even introducing a new midfielder? But as it was, Klopp kept it as it was. He moved Jota over to the right. Salah was down the middle, and he had the chances, to be fair, didn't he? You know, if Salah puts that one away where he tries to chip Ray and lands on the roof of the net, you're looking at it thinking, job done. Change was done at the right time and whatever else. Mane had a good chance. Ray made another unbelievable save right at the end, didn't he, when it could have easily been a goal. So Liverpool had 3 pretty big chances once Curtis Jones had come off. But I just felt it was a game where Liverpool missed Thiago, to be honest. And I didn't say it at 3-3. I said it midway through the game. I just felt that his composure, his control, his ability to get on the ball, play a few passes short and long, just basically slow it down and slow the tempo, take the sting out of it. I just felt that was missed. I thought Liverpool got dragged into a bit of a frenetic, free-for-all of a game, and that was exactly what Brentford wanted. Knocking it long, going direct, playing on Matip, playing on Van Dijk with Tony, and ultimately they got what they wanted and Liverpool didn't. So, there's been quite a lot of talk about Thiago already this season, but I think maybe in a weird way he's being taken for granted, and that was a game where Liverpool missed him, I thought. Although I did think Jones played well before he come off. Just felt Fabinho personally had a massive off day.
Yeah, definitely. Joe, what was your take on kind of the midfield setup and how it did change with Jones coming off? Because as Gorsty said, it felt as though when the change was going to be made at 2-2, you could completely understand it. But then when it wasn't, Curtis Jones has kind of become this functional midfield player and a very reliable option as well for Liverpool. He seems to be one of these who, touch wood, and I'll make sure I do, that he doesn't seem to pick up too many injuries. He's dependable and there to be called on by Jurgen Klopp when he needs him and can do whichever midfield role he needs. Did something a lot of people call out for, getting a goal from midfield for Liverpool. Then he comes off and it kind of changed the balance of the game. I just wonder with the injury to Thiago and Harvey Elliott as well, that Curtis Jones might be one of these players who needs a run in the team to work his way into some true form and can really become an asset.
I mean, on Curtis Jones, 100% agree. I really, really rate him, really, really like him. He's been usurped a little bit by Harvey Elliott this season, hasn't he, in the sense that, I think Harvey Elliott's the hot new thing that's come in and obviously is a hell of a talent. But you forget how young Curtis Jones is. He's only, 19, 20. He's homegrown. And let's face it, look at where he's at compared to some of the players of his age group. And there aren't many that I think people have this expectation that everyone has to be like Bellingham, where they have to be up here at such a young age. And I think with Curtis Jones, he's in such a good team that he can take a bit longer to develop. Liverpool don't need to play him every week. And I think it'll do him some good. And I think he's a hell of a talent. I really do. I think it is just a case of consistency, finding his identity on the pitch a little bit. As you've just said, he sort of floats between a few different roles, doesn't he? He's played off the attack sometimes. He plays as the more advanced midfielder. Could he drop deeper and have a bit more control, a bit more maturity? But I really like him. I think he's a really good talent. In terms of the substitution, it's a difficult one because I think Klopp had a point after the game. He said, didn't he? He said, I thought it worked quite well because we almost scored twice, almost immediately after making it. And he's not wrong. Like Salah and Mane both had really, really good opportunities to make it 4-2. And if they do, we're talking about that substitution as being clever as 10 in the screw on a Brentford side, which don't forget when Brentford scored the third goal, Liverpool were on top then. Liverpool were pressing and looking like they were going to take the game away from them. And I thought they would. So I see Klopp's point, and I think it's quite easy to sit here and say, well, he should have brought another midfielder on or left Curtis Jones on it. It's a difficult one, and managers have to make decisions, and they don't always go the way they want, do they? So it happened. I don't really think it was a bad or a good decision. It was just a decision he made. And in terms of the midfield, just to make it another point, I go back to a press conference earlier this season where an old friend of ours, James Pearce, asked Jurgen Klopp a question and got quite a fiery answer about his midfield options. And, he asked Klopp whether he'd considered signing a replacement for Wijnaldum. Klopp got quite fiery with him, didn't he? Got quite pointed and said, who would you sign? We've got Naby Keita, we've got Harvey Elliott, we've got Curtis Jones, we've got Thiago, and he named all his options. But my issue about all of that thing is that Klopp mentioned himself about Wijnaldum as his biggest asset was his reliability. And you list all those players, and I'm sorry, that I don't mean this to criticise them as players because they're all good players, but Keita, Thiago, Jones to an extent is young. Harvey Elliott has suffered a freak injury, but certainly Thiago and Keita have not been available enough. That has been the problem since both of them arrived. And yeah, they've been unlucky, and you can always, hope that they stay fit. But the body of evidence suggests that they don't. And that was, to me, what annoyed me in the summer about Liverpool and their sort of response to questions about recruitment was, we've got X amount of players. But the whole point in Wijnaldum is that he was fit and available every game. And you can't tell me that midfield is stronger without him. It just isn't. So that frustrates me, and it frustrates me now. And that isn't a hindsight thing. It was clear at the time, and that's why I think, a lot of people argued that Liverpool needed a forward, but the forwards are often available. The midfielders aren't. I think they needed a midfielder, and I think, again, Thiago is unavailable, probably going to miss the Man City game, and Liverpool are, a light in that area, and I don't think you can rely on Keita. So I've got a big problem with the midfield, and I think it showed.
Klopp said today in his press conference, he basically admitted that he never has a full complement of midfielders to choose from because there's always someone injured. So he's acknowledging that. So it's what was the wisdom of letting 50 appearance Gino Wijnaldum leave without any thought of a replacement? But we're raking over the coals there, aren't we? We've discussed that. So we've been blue in the face for the best part of 6 months.
It's worth remembering as well, and this has just come to me now. It's not just Keita and Thiago; it's Henderson as well. Oxlade-Chamberlain's not been fit enough. You go through all the midfielders, and I've just thought of that then. So it's blatantly obvious, and I thought Klopp was very unfair in the way he answered James's question that time, because I think as well it betrayed a little bit of Klopp actually being slightly annoyed that he'd lost a very good player that he relied upon, and bit back a little bit. But I think he was slightly unfair to aim his frustration at James at that day. So yeah,
no, that's fair enough as well, Joe. Sometimes when you make a point and someone else steps in, it gives you a chance to just think. It's like when you think about things, isn't it? Yeah, I should have said that. So no, throwing Henderson and Ox in there as well. No, that's fair enough. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One other thing we've spoken about till we're blue in the face, as Gorsty said there, Theo, is Mohamed Salah's goal scoring exploits, and easy to forget that he did get his 100th league goal for the club in this game, albeit it seemed as though everyone wanted to focus on that missed chance that he had that could well have made it 4-2. But for the 1,000th time, where would Liverpool be without the goals of Mohamed Salah?
Exactly. He's just reaching these new levels, and the fact that people are making such a big deal about the miss is because you expect him to score it, because you've seen him in that situation and scoring that chance so many times before, and you'll see him scoring that chance so many times again. But sometimes players do miss chances. They are human. It's not as though Cristiano Ronaldo scored again against Aston Villa. Players miss chances. They don't always score. But Mohamed Salah is still reaching new levels. And you look at the list, he's into the top 10 now of Liverpool's all-time goal scorers. Realistically, you could be overtaking another 2-3 players on that list before the end of the season. And it's almost just becoming normal, isn't it? You expect him to go and score 30, 40 goals now every year because he is reaching those levels. And it is a case of these are potentially the best years of his career. When we're speaking about Ronaldo or Messi in the past and their peak years, it was this sort of age where you see the best of Salah. And you can see now, whenever he's on the ball, he's got that smile on his face again. He's really enjoying his football. And that's probably why he misses this chance when you think about it, because he is so confident at the moment that he expects everything he does to come off. And maybe it was a bit of a lazy chance opportunity when he's just chipped it rather than just rolling it into the corner. But then it could be something he needs. Like, you're not going to just score every single chance. It's a reminder that you do need to take your chances and not just take it for granted that it's going to score. And you can imagine that will be the one he will be unhappy with. He'll be celebrating the fact that he got his 100th goal, but he'll be disappointed he's not on 101. And he'll be going out to make it right in the Champions League against Porto and add another couple under his belt there.
Yeah, definitely. And okay, let's look away from the Brentford game, and those were maybe 2 points dropped for Liverpool. We'll have to wait and see in the grand scheme if it was. May well be a 0.1 on the road. But away from Liverpool, Gorsty, and elsewhere in the Premier League, surprise, surprise, after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's rant, I suppose are we going to call it, about not getting penalties and a very, very thinly veiled dig at Jurgen Klopp. His side get a penalty. just so satisfying to see it fly over the top of the crossbar?
Just the MUFC podcast, the Red Devil podcast.
I'm just saying, any coincidence, do you think, that Solskjaer has that rant and all of a sudden he decided to get a penalty?
I think it might be this time. I watched it back earlier today, catching up on the weekend's football, and I did think it was a penalty, to be honest. Courtney Hawes's hand is out quite a lot, so it was a bit of an easy one for the referee. I think it was Mike Riley, was it? Not Mike Riley, Mike Dean. I think that was probably one of the more obvious ones that they do get. But as I said on Friday's podcast about this, it's clearly a tactic that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer has employed. It's probably his one main attacking tactic, to send his players out there to get penalties. Not in terms of go down and jump around the floor every chance you get, but it's certainly a let's get in the penalty box, let's see what happens, let's take touches in there and see if we can win penalties, because I don't see any kind of attacking pattern from United. There's no real clear way that they're trying to attack. It is just, at the moment, it just seems like they've packed a load of names onto a team sheet and they've got a bit of a, for lack of a better phrase, a cheerleader of a manager. I don't think there's ever been a manager reach the kind of level that he has with such a modest CV in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think that's just the way that Solskjaer sends his United team out to try and win penalties, or relying on a bit of individual magic from one of the many key names, star names, to pull something out the fire. And on Saturday, it didn't work for them. And I think we might see that quite often, to be honest, this season. They were quite fortunate not to draw with West Ham and Wolves. They were lucky to beat Wolves. So, unconvincing start to the season of them so far.
Yeah, and I suppose their title credentials haven't been challenged anywhere near as much as Liverpool's, Joe. But I suppose it does this weekend and wider, as I say, than Liverpool across the Premier League. Goes to show how difficult points are going to be to win in this season. Perhaps the most competitive in the 30 years of the Premier League.
Yeah, that's why, as I said earlier, I just don't think... I can't see a season where one team goes and gets 90-odd points, just because I can't see any team running away with it, you know. If you look through every single team, Liverpool obviously had such a difficult season last year. They're not going to be at the same level as they were 2 years ago. City do lack a striker, so for all their good play, I think at times they, even at the Chelsea game at the weekend, and look, Chelsea are a tough team to break down. I watched it, and I don't think City had all of the ball, but they didn't have a lot of great chances. Obviously, Gorsty's just touched upon United's problems. I don't see any one side really running away with it. But I mean, what you've just said, it does tell you what, it really does annoy me that Liverpool get the sort of the short shrift that they've been getting at the start of the season, because the way they're dismissed, the way everyone's talking about Chelsea, the way everyone's been talking about United, it is funny because we do have this recency bias, don't we, in the sense that like Chelsea sign a couple of players, get a new manager in, and it's suddenly like, well, Chelsea title favourites. Well, why? They don't have the body of evidence that's built up over any period of time to show that they should be considered title favourites. I get with Man City, you never write Man City off because they're a very, very good team. And even at the start of last year, where we thought perhaps they weren't at the peak of their powers, they show that they can put a run together. And with City could go out and win 15 games in a row right now, and you wouldn't be surprised. But Chelsea, I just find it bizarre. United, it's even more bizarre. They've got a manager who's not qualified to manage Manchester United. They've got a collection of players who, whilst skillful, don't exactly fit perfectly together. And, like the likes of Harry Maguire, he's a bang average centre-half that's playing for United. But he is. He's a bang average centre-half that isn't fit to lace Van Dijk's boots. Yeah, we look at them, Varane, it's not the force he was. So I just find it annoys me, that these teams get talked about, and a lot of it's driven by, the highest, Gary Neville, for example, is, you hear from him a lot, don't you? And he's on Twitter giving a Q&A today when he's asked where Liverpool have finished third or fourth. And I think, like, why would you expect Liverpool to finish below United after what Liverpool have done? And I know they did last year, but let's just remember last year they had ridiculous amount of injuries. So you don't expect them to have that ridiculous amount of injuries. But what Liverpool have done over recent years is far better. So I just find it utterly bizarre the way they're dismissed. So to me, it's no surprise how well Liverpool have played sometimes this season and the way their rivals have played. But, it annoys me. Can you tell?
Yeah, just a bit, Theo. Does it annoy you as much as it annoys Joe?
Probably not, to be honest. But then you just take it on the chin, don't you? I think I've said it before. During the summer, you look at these sides that Liverpool up against for the title, and City still lack the striker. Chelsea, they still wanted to sign a centre back. You think they've got some talented attacking players to support Lukaku, but they're not proven to the extent of a Salah or a Mane yet. Like, you see more Havertz and Pulisic's potential rather than that world-class ability that will win you games and will just score every single match. United, they desperately still need a good central midfielder. The fact that their best central midfielder, they play left wing because they don't think he's good enough to play central midfield anymore. And it's all very well having all these attacking players and giving Cristiano Ronaldo however much money to come back and win you a league or whatever they want him to do. But he didn't win the league for Juventus last year. He didn't win the Champions League for them, which was the whole point they signed him in the first place. But you look at Liverpool's team, and the starting 11 is pretty complete. Like, if the players play to the top of their ability, you can't really find many holes in it. Like, the midfield three we know is, on paper, one of the best in the league. It's all A-list names. The back five is the back five that won the Champions League and the Premier League. It's like the best centre-back in the world, the best goalkeeper in the world, the best fullbacks in the world. The only question is whether the strikers are good enough, because, Salah and Mane will get you goals, but sometimes you still want that number 9 that is going to get you 30, 40 goals a season. But it's still better to have Jota and Firmino than it is to have Ferran Torres, whoever City try and disguise as striker who isn't really there. So I'm kind of happy that you get people writing them off like Gary Neville saying they're going to finish 3rd and 4th, just because it means it's so hard to predict, and it means that Liverpool have it more in their hands. Like last year, they were the side to beat, weren't they? That it was to take it off them, and everyone was so delighted when it fell apart for them as an opposing fan. But then this year, it's like when they are being written off, you think there's more of that chance that they can come strong, and it can be a throwback to the year they won the Champions League, the year they won the Premier League.
Yeah, we'll have to see. Right, let's get on to looking ahead to the game with Porto then. Gorsty, you were sitting in on Jurgen Klopp's pre-match press conference, and one of the lines I want to talk about immediately that I was really sort of interested was right at the end of the press conference, was being asked about the leadership group. Of course, Jorginho Wijnaldum moving on. He was one of 4, and now there's 6 of them because of all the injuries last season.
Yeah, I was surprised by that, actually. I remember writing the Blood Red column a few months back on basically now that Wijnaldum's left, there's a 4th spot open in that players' committee group, as Klopp calls it. So I kind of made the case for Salah. I thought probably mean a lot to him that he'd be considered as a captain. We know they kind of stink, for lack of a better term, that he made when he wasn't captain in Midtjylland, and that he obviously takes great pride in that. So I thought that it might have been him. I could also see a case for Trent Alexander-Arnold, but I didn't expect Klopp to come out and basically just say he turned the 3-man committee into a 6-man one now, just because of the amount of injuries that they had last year. But so he has. It's it's obviously still Henderson and Milner, and now Van Dijk is in there, and now it's Trent, Andy Robertson, and Alisson. Obviously, they put a 2-players vote, and they were the 3 that come out on top. So I think it just kind of speaks to the amount of leaders that Liverpool have got in their squad. I mean, Klopp does it almost on the basis of who's been at the club the longest when he passes the armband to a player. So say if Henderson and Milner aren't there, Van Dijk gets it, but then after that, it's you're looking at like Divock Origi might get the armband because he's been there since 2014, or Firmino, and don't think his English is too great, but it seems as though he's just expanded it to a point where there's always going to be someone who's going to be stepping into the captain's role as a captain, as opposed to just being there for hanging on for longer than anyone else. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll mean too much outside of the Liverpool bubble, but yeah, it's probably a good move.
I'm going to go straight in, Joe, with it and ask the question that maybe a few people are wondering, or those thinking, no, he shouldn't be burdened with that. But surprised that Mohamed Salah wasn't kind of amongst that number, given it is now 6 players.
Yeah, you know what I was, and I weirdly, I did slightly concern me because I think he was quite outspoken, wasn't he, at the time when he wanted the armband against Midtjylland. Sorry, I've just butchered that to any of our Danish friends, but he was quite outspoken about it. He obviously considers it quite a responsibility, and I think it probably would sweeten the deal if you're trying to keep him at the club, wouldn't it, as well? So, yeah, was slightly surprised, actually, that he wasn't in there. And I also think Salah, they obviously, behind the scenes, know very well, but just from the outside looking in, to me, seems like a bit of a leader. Obviously the way he leads on the pitch, the way he looks after himself. This is a guy who, he was doing laps of his pool at 3 a.m. after Liverpool had played the other week. He's a guy who just dedicates himself, in the way that Cristiano Ronaldo does it, dedicates himself to his craft. So I was a little bit surprised. Yeah, I think he'd make a good captain, or certainly a good contender to be in that group. So yeah, surprised. I think it's a little bit of a shame, but I suppose it does speak to how many good leaders Liverpool have. They have a lot of players that you'd be quite happy for them to take on that responsibility. Alisson was in there, wasn't he? And you can tell, look at the way Liverpool reacted to his goal, to his interview, to everything that happened afterwards. I was quite pleased to see him in there, because goalkeepers don't always, obviously you got Lloris at Tottenham, but you don't always see goalkeepers hold the armband. And, I think with Alisson, he clearly is someone that the squad likes, respects, looks up to. So that was good. But yeah, surprised that Salah wasn't in there.
Glad we got another member of the Goalkeepers Union on the podcast. Joe, nice to have you on board. More keepers should have the armband. Anyway,
I'm only 5'7". I can't be a goalkeeper.
Yeah, Theo, what about Trent then? Is it the first signs of future Liverpool captain now coming to bear? I suppose he has had the armband on occasion to end games in the past, but I suppose formally now recognition that he's on his way.
Well, it felt like everyone had the armband at some point towards the end of last season. But then Trent has spoken in the past how he wants to be this Liverpool captain in the future. And he's been at the club a long time now. He's just signed this new long-term contract. He is very much part of the club's future as this lead and talisman of the club. And when you see the likes of Henderson or Van Dijk lose their place in the years to come when age catches up on them, and I'm talking 5-6 years down the line, without predicting who Liverpool are going to sign, you wouldn't be surprised to see Trent as the captain. But then are we putting a bit too much importance on the armband? When you think Liverpool have all these leaders in this team, whether they're captains for their international sides or they've had the armband for Liverpool in the past, only one of them can wear the armband in the games, but they're all in the starting 11 pretty much, aren't they? And they're all still offering those attributes. Maybe part of it's just because it was so important for Liverpool in the past. When you think of just in the Premier League, like Steven Gerrard, when it was iconic, wasn't it? It was what defined him as a Liverpool player, almost being this legendary captain. And now it isn't as important as that, because like James Milner is a great player, but he's not the best player in the Liverpool team. But if Henderson's out, you have no qualms at all about him leading that team out. And I just think some managers these days, they're not so bothered about it. Like you look at Manchester City, they do a vote for their captaincy at the start of every season. And I think Fernandinho's the captain. Last year, De Bruyne was the vice-captain. He led them out in the Champions League final. But the vote this year, he's lost that place. I think he's now down to 4th or 5th, with Ruben Dias overtaking him and maybe Gundogan as well. So it's like, well, they've still got them in the team. They're still leaders in the squads. It's maybe not as important who's got the armband on. Because if you, for some reason, took the armband off Jordan Henderson, for example, and wanted to give it to Trent, the way that Houllier did with Hoopier and with Gerrard back in 2002, 2003, you're still going to have that leadership there for Jordan Henderson. It's not going to make him any less of a player. He might be a bit miffed to lose the armband. I'm not saying he's going to lose the armband or anything, but they're still great players. They've got these leadership attributes, and it's why Liverpool have got this winning mentality now, and why they 9 times out of 10 see games out, can challenge for trophies, can challenge at the top of the league.
Yeah, definitely. Also speaking then to the press was Diogo Jota ahead of going back to one of his former clubs, Gorsty. And I have to say, of sort of all the responses he gave and everything, I was just really impressed with the manner in which he dealt with it all. Less than 12 months a Liverpool player, and you can see just how much he's relishing being not just one of the team, but one of the the star performers, I suppose. Got another goal at the weekend, and did speak about kind of coming into the club and having that task of breaking up the fabled front three.
Yeah, he was quite guarded, I thought. Every time I see Diogo Jota speak, he never gives too much away, and always just about says enough to get through his answer without being particularly short. I thought Klopp was quite good when he was asked about Jota, actually, and he said, well, this guy is almost the perfect player for us. His work rate, he's got 2 good feet, he's good in the air, he's fast, he's mature, he's young, and he's pretty much got everything that you need. And so far, he's shown that, hasn't he? As a Liverpool player, I think the goal on Saturday was his 8th goal in his last 9 away games. Seems to be really good in the air, which is strange when you don't really consider him as someone who's known to be a bit of a target man, but he seems to score his fair share of headers, and has fitted into this Liverpool squad perfectly, hasn't he? Given Roberto Firmino a bit of a rocket, as a challenger for that front three, and when he starts now ahead of Firmino, you're not really surprised, and you don't think it's a drop off in quality, and he's been superb in his 12 months, and I think him stepping up today, about to return to his homeland, his former club. I think he was probably the right man to step up and speak, wasn't he? And a kind of pointer of his growing responsibility within the squad.
Yeah, that goal at the weekend as well seems kind of going off his face, off his cheekbone as well. But Joe, in terms of, I suppose, the expectation and the reality of kind of what Liverpool ended up getting with Diogo Jota, I suppose pound for pound, he must be up there with Mohamed Salah and maybe even surpassing Sadio Mane right now. But I suppose historically, when you look at it, alongside those guys, for what Liverpool thought they were getting was a backup forward, and he's now certainly a ready-made first choice.
Obviously, I've come onto this podcast with a bit of a chip on my shoulder today, but that sort of just backs up my feelings that, like, again, Liverpool don't really get the credit they deserve. They've obviously made a really, really good signing there. Scored 9 goals in 19 Premier League games last season. He's got 3 and 6 this year. Scores all different types of goals, doesn't he? He's really good in the air, surprisingly good for his height and his size, and scores with his left foot, his right foot, tap-ins, all sorts of types of goals, can play in each position of the front three. So, honestly, just such a good signing. And again, when you look at it and you think, these big money deals, and I get why, I get why the Lukakus and the Cristiano Ronaldos of the world, get the credit, that they do. But Jota has been a revelation since he arrived at Liverpool. And it's almost just like, I think if you ask most people in the country who are Liverpool's front three at the moment, they'd probably still throw Firmino in there. When I think Jota's sort of come to the fore now as the more senior man there. So, I think he's been a revelation of a signing. I think the way he's come into Liverpool, it's like he's played for them for years. The big step up he's had from Wolves. Again, just looking at his goals there, he did manage 16 goals, 7 Premier League goals his final season with Wolves, but he's improved upon that immediately. I just think he fits into Liverpool's style of play. Again, it's another really, really clever signing that sort of drifted under the radar. So, yeah, I mean, fair play to them, and I think he's going to be key this season. And you'd back him to get 20 goals in all competitions, wouldn't you? The way he started and the way he carries on. So I'm really, really pleased with him. They deserve a lot of credit.
Yeah, I think as well, I remember Wolves fans kind of sort of making the argument that they had Pedro Neto there, they had Daniel Podence, and actually it was kind of Liverpool taking Diogo Jota off their hands and doing them, I suppose, a bit of a favour to get those guys into the team. But what a signing he has been, and I suppose helped mask as well the drop-off in form that Sadio Mane has certainly witnessed. But before we go, let's get into our team selection then for the game with Porto to be played at Stadio Dragao. Gorsty, Alisson in goal. You can talk us through what your back four would be.
Maybe a night for Joe Gomez. I'm surprised in the last Champions League game when Klopp took out Van Dijk. He played Gomez alongside Matip, but I think maybe give Matip a bit of a breather bring Gomez in alongside Van Dijk, and everyone else stays the same.
Theo, what do you reckon? Because I have to say, personally, I wasn't sure if the defensive vulnerabilities at the weekend maybe were a case of chopping and changing these defenders, and accept that Matip might well eventually get an injury, but keep Van Dijk and Matip together until one of them is injured and has to be taken out.
No, I think it's still going to rotate. You don't want to have them playing 3 games a week when they're still feeling the way back. But I'd say it's probably Van Dijk that drops out, just because Matip has had the 2 games off last week, didn't he? And then it's a tough call. Who do you go with between Gomez and Konate? Joe Gomez, I suppose he's more stable. He's had the experience, but he's coming back from injury as well. It's whether he's still got that adrenaline. Konate, I suppose he's more like for Van Dijk, and it'll be good to see him get another opportunity. So I think I'll lean towards Konate in for Van Dijk. Trent's obviously at right back, and maybe it's another chance for Tsimikas, because he's playing so well when he is given the opportunity, and Robertson's not at the best form. It's like, do you hope Robertson can play into form, or do you just keep giving Tsimikas these opportunities to see if he can make the shirt his own? I think there's a bit of rotation in the past when it was more level between Moreno and Robertson. So, yeah, let's see what Tsimikas can do for this one, because you'd be expecting Robertson to start against Manchester City, wouldn't you? So probably more chopping and changing for now.
Okay, Joe, what do you reckon?
I think this is his hardest team selection of the season so far, because I think Porto's a really tricky game, especially away from home. They've got a lot of good players. And as Theo's just said with Van Dijk, you rest him ahead of City. You want him available for that game. But then do you play him again after a bit of a wobbly game on Saturday? I'm going to lean towards playing him. I'm taking that risk. Play Van Dijk like Gorsty. I get Gomez in there. I think Gomez did well in the games he's played this season. Obviously shaky moments at the end of the first half against Milan, but otherwise I thought equipped himself well. Thought he was very good at Norwich. And considering he's come back from a horrific injury, has played well. So I'd have Gomez in there. And like Theo, I'd have Tsimikas, because I think he's just impressed so much this season that he deserves his chance, especially with Robertson not quite being in form. And again, like with Theo, I think Robertson will play against Man City. So, yeah, Tsimikas and Gomez in for Matip and Robertson.
Theo, come back to you then on the midfield. What's your 3, or is it a 2?
It's a 3. Going to start James Milner. Going to let Jones keep his place. And then it's between Fabinho or Henderson at the number 6. I'll go with Fabinho just because it's more his position, isn't it? And Henderson seems more likely to be in and out the team this season.
Okay, Gorsty, what about yourself? Jurgen Klopp was asked about team news, and he said other than the long-term injuries, we're all good. He mentioned Harvey Elliott and mentioned Thiago. So we're expecting an extended spell on the sidelines for him, as well as obviously what your midfield 3 is going to be.
Yeah, possibly. It reminds me of last year when he got that knock from Richarlison, and just appeared to be a bit of an impact knock. And every week almost you're waiting for the updates, and you keep getting told that he's not back yet. And before you know it, he's out for 3 months. I hope it's not anything near like that, but so far it just tends to be a bit of a vague, he's not in for this one. Keita's back. Hard to believe he's missed 135 minutes because he kicked the floor at Norwich on Tuesday night, but that probably gives you a bit of an idea of his don't know really. Just kind of reminds me a bit of Daniel Sturridge, where if they weren't 100%, then they were injured. But he's back in contention. And I can't imagine Fabinho to have another game as poor as that, so I'm going to stick with him. I'll stick with Henderson. And go on, I'll bring Keita back in for this one.
Joe?
Yeah, I think I'd go with the same as Gorsty. I think so. Yeah, I mean, for the same reasons, really. I think Fabinho is sort of an ever-present, isn't he? And someone that, I don't think he'd have as bad a game as he did Saturday. Henderson, you want him in there for experience. I suppose I would be tempted to rest someone whether you switch Henderson for Milner in that situation, just because you want them. You don't want to risk any more midfield injuries for Sunday. And then Keita, I mean, I shouldn't laugh at what Gorsty said there and kicking the floor, but it is a frustration with Keita, isn't it? That every single time he gets started, it only has to be a little niggle, but it's 1 or 2 games out, and it does feel like he's one of those players who just isn't quite, ready to play if he's feeling something. And I think, you wrote it in your piece, didn't you, recently, Gorsty? It's quite telling, isn't it, what Klopp said about Sturridge all those years ago. He needs to learn pain and real pain, and I think that is telling, because I think there's players. It's no coincidence that someone like Carragher hardly ever missed a game, is it? And I think just everyone's different. Everyone has different thresholds. I mean, I struggle to get out of bed in the morning these days, so I can't say too much. But yeah, I just want Keita to get a bit of a run of games, because you feel like, and we've been burnt before, but you feel like he could be someone that could make a bit of an impact this season. So yeah, I'd throw Keita in as well. But I'm going to stick with Henderson. So Fabinho, Henderson, Keita. So
yeah, that's what you said. Yeah. No, that is the same as Gorsty. Yeah, no, I think you take it more as a bonus when he is fit, actually. No,
almost.
As opposed to, you take it as Reddy's injured, and then when he's fit, you go, oh, yeah, he's up for selection. But
anyway, that's how we saw Sturridge in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, exactly. Very much along those, and I suppose Adam Lallana even at times as well. But Joe, what about the front three?
I'd go for Firmino. I'd get him back in. Salah, because he's just ever present, and Jota. And look, I don't subscribe to these like Mane is awful sort of things that have been going around recently. And look, he's not quite there, is he? He's not quite on it like we've seen him done it before. But to me, he's still a menace every game. He gets the ball, he attacks, he drives teams back, he gets himself into good positions, and the goals will come. I'm sure of it. I think he's just too much of a good player. He never hides. So I'm a big fan of Mane, but I do think he's the natural one to rotate out, and I'd still have him playing Sunday. But I just like Firmino for some of these away games, especially in the Champions League. I think it works for him.
Do you go along with that, Theo? And if so, how big a opportunity and I suppose audition is it ahead of taking on Man City for Roberto Firmino?
I'd say it's an audition for Mane, Firmino, and Jota, really. Like as Joe says, Salah's the ever-present, but then you could argue that the other three, you could see any of them drop out at the moment, because Mane will have one good game, then he'll have one bad game. He's not at the heights we've seen in the past. Jota's been a bit inconsistent as well, and then Firmino, he had a good pre-season, got the injury at the wrong time, and we're still waiting to find out if he's first choice or not. I know Joe says he thinks Jota is now and Firmino's maybe dropped out. Well, I'm guessing we'll find out this weekend, won't we? Because if it's Firmino up front, he's still very much in that first choice front three, because if you're playing against Man City, then you're playing him for a must-win Premier League title decider or a Champions League final. You could make argues for any of them. Sadio Mane's had good luck, good form against Porto in the past. Diogo Jota, it's his former club, back in his homeland, chance to impress. And then you want to see Firmino have a game, see if he's got some form in his legs, if he can get that injury out of his system and just turn it on ahead of playing City at the weekend. It's such a hard one to call. I think I'm going to go for the traditional front three for this one. Let Mane keep his place, and then Jota can come off the bench, and then it's any one of those three could drop out against City.
Where are you going, Gorsty? Are you going to change things up, or are you going to agree with one of the guys?
Yeah, I agree with everything Joe said, to be honest, in terms of...
You two have a symmetry going on here. You agreed with your midfield, you agreed with his attacking line.
Great minds and all that. I agree with...
Knows who his boss is, doesn't he?
I'm not. That's the ironic thing. I'm not.
He's got holiday approval, just waiting for it to go through.
Yeah, I agree with starting Jota and Firmino and Salah, but I do think the Mane is doomed narrative is being exaggerated a little bit. He still scored 3 goals this season, and he missed a handful against Leeds, and it was almost becoming embarrassing for him before he finally got it. But he's going to be a massive player this season for Liverpool, as he has been every season. So keep him well rested for Sunday, because he's got a bit of previous against Man City, hasn't he? I think so. Yeah, Jota on the left, Firmino and Salah.
Yeah, interesting then to see how it goes. Quickly then, before we go, predictions on the result. Gorsty first, then Theo and Joe to finish us off. How's it going to play out?
So fun, isn't it? I mean, still the same manager that Liverpool have beaten 9-1 over, the aggregate score across the last 2 visits. I'm not sure if the squad is much different. I think Cancel and Bemba might be suspended. So go on, I'll back Liverpool. I'll say 2-0.
It's not going to be 5-0. It's not going to be 4-1. Let's say Liverpool score 3, just because that seems to be the go-to at the moment. I'll go 3-1.
I'm going to go on and do a full-on Doyle here and say a 1-1. I just don't know. I just feel like there's something about this Porto team that I think people are sort of dismissing, and I think away from home might be slightly more tricky for Liverpool. A 1-1, which isn't a bad 1-1, by the way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they've been dubbed the whipping boys of the group, haven't they? But they did come out of pot 3, so they're by no means minnows. And yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Yeah. What was that, Gorsty?
Beat that, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. So it's not going to be an easy game, certainly out there. So let's end up seeing how it does play out. Of course, you can follow all of the match coverage across on the Liverpool Echo with the live match blog. Plenty of reaction to come as well, of course, here on the Blood Red YouTube channel. Do subscribe if you haven't done so already. And we will, of course, bring you the post-game podcast as well, wherever it is you get your audio on demand. But from myself, Guy Clarke, Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and Theo Squires, thanks for your time and company. It's bye for now.
This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.